The reluctant bride, Princess Thessa Vorneth, pressed her palm against the cold observation window and watched distant stars blur into silver streaks. Her reflection stared back at her with golden eyes that betrayed nothing of the chaos churning inside her chest. Purple skin marked with delicate silver patterns along her cheekbones and forehead caught the station's dim lighting. She wore the ceremonial robes of her house in deep violet, threaded with platinum, and the weight of them felt heavier than any armor she had ever worn. In 2 hours, she would meet the human she was expected to marry. 3 years of war had brought both empires to their knees. The Zalari had lost 17 colony worlds and millions of lives. The humans had suffered equally, and every family on both sides had buried someone they loved. Now diplomats claimed that marriage between their peoples would seal a lasting peace. Ancient tradition, they called it, a symbol of unity between former enemies. Thessa had volunteered when her father, the emperor, gathered his children to explain the situation. Her older sisters remained silent with their own families to protect. Her younger brother was barely past his 20th cycle. That left Thessa, third daughter, trained in 7 languages and diplomatic protocols, valuable enough to matter, but expendable enough to sacrifice. The door behind her opened with a soft hiss, and Commander Dryce entered. He had been her personal guard since childhood, and his dark blue skin bore the angular silver markings of a warrior house. His presence had always brought her comfort, but today even he could not ease her anxiety. "The human vessel has docked, Your Highness," he said quietly. Thessa nodded without turning from the window. "What do you know of him?" "Captain Marcus Webb, 29 standard years, combat pilot with extensive decorations and an impressive service record." Dryce paused before continuing. "For a human, he appears honorable." "You do not approve?" "I do not trust them. 3 years ago, they were our enemies. Now we pretend friendship because politicians demand it." His voice carried the weight of someone who had fought in the war and lost friends to human weapons. "We are not pretending, Dryce." Thessa finally turned to face him. "We are trying to build something new. Perhaps that is naive, but I must believe it." "Perhaps, Your Highness." She smoothed her robes and lifted her chin. "Take me to the formal chamber. Let us not keep Captain Webb waiting." The walk through the neutral station felt endless. Gray corridors and recycled air surrounded them as diplomats from a dozen species moved past on their own missions of peace. The formal chamber was slightly better, with seating designed for multiple species and artwork from various worlds decorating the walls. Admiral Patricia Holloway was already waiting. The human woman appeared to be in her early 50s, with silver hair cut short and sharp gray eyes that missed nothing. 2 officers stood behind her in crisp uniforms. "Princess Thessa," the admiral said with a respectful nod. "Admiral Holloway, I am told Captain Webb has arrived. He is preparing and should join us shortly. Please sit." Thessa sat and kept her back straight and her hands folded in her lap. Dryce took his position behind her like a shadow. The minutes stretched as she studied the humans across the table. They looked fragile compared to Zalari, with their soft skin and smaller frames. It seemed impossible that such beings had fought her people to a standstill. The door opened again, and Thessa felt her breath catch. The man who entered was tall for a human, but still shorter by her by several inches. He had dark hair that fell across his forehead and warm brown eyes that seemed to hold both kindness and sorrow. He wore his uniform well, but there was nothing aggressive about his posture. No warrior's pride in his stance. He simply walked in, and when he saw her, he stopped. For a moment, they stared at each other across the room. 2 strangers bound together by forces beyond their control. Then Marcus crossed the distance and extended his hand in the human gesture of greeting. Thessa had studied the custom, and she rose to take his hand. His grip was firm but gentle, and his skin was surprisingly warm against her cooler purple fingers. "Princess Thessa," he said, and his voice was calm and measured. "I am Marcus Webb. It is an honor to meet you." She searched his face for resentment or deception or hidden anger. She found only exhaustion and something that might have been resignation. He did not want this, either, she realized. That knowledge somehow made her feel less alone. "Captain Webb," she replied, "the honor is mine." They released hands and stood there unsure of what came next. Admiral Holloway cleared her throat and suggested they discuss the wedding arrangements. For the next hour, they reviewed ceremony details and blended traditions. Marcus spoke little, but when he did, his words were thoughtful and respectful. He asked about Zalari customs because he wanted to understand them, not mock them. When the formal discussions ended and their advisors stepped away, Marcus and Thessa found themselves alone at the table. The silence stretched between them. "I read about your home world," Marcus said finally. "The crystal caves of Zellar Prime. They sound beautiful." Learning to trust. 6 months of marriage had taught Thessa that living with a human was strange in ways she never anticipated. Their quarters aboard the diplomatic vessel Horizon were designed to accommodate both species, with temperature controls set to a compromise that left them both slightly uncomfortable. The food processors held recipes from both worlds, and even the sleeping area was divided to give them each their own space. A political marriage did not require them to share everything. Thessa sat at her desk, reviewing agricultural exchange reports between colony worlds, boring work but necessary for the peace they were building. Across the room, Marcus stood at the human food station, stirring something in a metal pot. Steam rose around him, and the smell was unfamiliar but pleasant. "Are you hungry?" he asked, without turning around. "I ate earlier. This is different. It is called risotto. Comfort food from Earth." He glanced over his shoulder and his expression softened. "My grandmother used to make it when I was young." Thessa saved her work and walked over to watch him cook. Marcus had removed his uniform jacket and rolled up his sleeves, revealing the muscles in his forearms. It was the most casual she had ever seen him, and something about the domesticity of the scene made her chest feel warm. "Your grandmother?" she said carefully. They did not often speak of his lost loved ones. "She raised me after my parents died in a shuttle accident." Marcus kept his voice steady, but Thessa had learned to hear the pain underneath. She believed food could fix anything. Bad day at school meant fresh bread. Heartbreak meant chocolate cake. End of the world meant risotto. "She sounds wonderful." She was. Marcus turned off the heat and began portioning the food onto 2 plates. "There is plenty if you want to try." Thessa did not refuse. They ate together at the small table between their 2 sides of the quarters. The risotto was creamy and rich with vegetables and spices that tingled on her tongue. It was very different from Zalari food, which tended toward raw proteins and mineral-rich plants. "Do you like it?" Marcus asked. "It is warm." Thessa took another bite. "Zalari do not usually cook our food, but I understand now why humans do. There is something comforting about it." "Exactly. Sometimes warm is good." They ate in companionable silence. This had become their pattern over the past months, small gestures of sharing and learning each other's habits. Marcus had started studying the Zalari language seriously and practiced with her each evening. Thessa had introduced him to her favorite philosophical texts, though the complex concepts clearly confused him. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus set down his fork and looked at her directly. "Yes." "Why did you really volunteer for this?" "I know you said it was duty, but there had to be more to it." Thessa considered the question. They had been careful with each other for so long, polite and distant, but lately the distance had been shrinking, and perhaps it was time for honesty. "My older sisters both had arranged marriages," she said. "Traditional Zalari matches chosen by my father. They are not happy. I watched them grow smaller over the years. When this opportunity came, I thought at least I would be choosing my own sacrifice, and perhaps marrying a human would be different." "Different how?" "Humans do not have the same expectations. You do not require your wives to be silent or subordinate or to fulfill 100 social obligations." She met his eyes and felt vulnerable in a way she rarely allowed herself. "I thought perhaps I could just be myself." Marcus nodded slowly. "And can you be yourself, I mean?" "I am learning how." Thessa paused. "What about you?"
You have an excellent service record. You could have refused this assignment." "No, I could not." Marcus's expression grew distant and his brown eyes darkened with memory. "My last mission was an evacuation run on Station Vega. We were trying to get civilians out before your fleet arrived. I saved most of them, but not all. 63 people died because I was not fast enough. That was not your fault." "War is no one's fault and everyone's fault." Marcus's voice was quiet but firm. "I have been fighting since I was 19, 10 years of combat. I have killed people, Thessa. I have watched friends die beside me. And for what? Because our governments could not figure out how to communicate." He looked at her directly and she saw the weight he carried in his gaze. "When Admiral Holloway asked me to volunteer for this, I saw a way to make my service mean something. If our marriage could help end the war, then maybe all those deaths would matter." "Then we are both trying to make meaning from loss," she said softly. "Yeah, I guess we are." That conversation changed something between them. They began to talk more freely, sharing pieces of themselves they had kept hidden. Marcus told her about growing up on Earth and his fascination with ancient military history. He showed her books on his electronic reader filled with strategies from wars fought thousands of years ago. Thessa shared her passion for xenobiology and how different species adapted to different environments. Marcus listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed he was truly paying attention. "You would have made an excellent scientist," he said one evening as they sat together reviewing her research notes. "And you would have made a good scholar. Why did you become a soldier?" Marcus's smile faded. "Family tradition partly, but mostly because I wanted to protect people. The Federation was expanding into dangerous territory, and someone had to stand between civilians and the threats out there." "Noble." "Not really." Marcus looked at his hands. "I am good at violence, Thessa. That's just the truth. Better to use that skill protecting people than pretending I am something else." Thessa thought about that. Zalari believed skill in combat was the highest virtue, but Marcus seemed almost apologetic about his abilities, as if being good at fighting was a flaw rather than a strength. Their ship traveled constantly between colony worlds. One week at a Zalari settlement attending ceremonies and giving speeches about unity, the next week at a human outpost, touring facilities and meeting local leaders. Everywhere they went, people watched them carefully, measuring them, judging whether this peace would hold. At a reception on the human world of New Geneva, a reporter asked Thessa what she thought of her husband. The question was clearly meant to provoke. "Captain Webb is a man of honor," Thessa replied smoothly. "He respects my culture and works hard for peace. I am fortunate." "But do you love him?" the reporter pressed. Beside her, Marcus tensed slightly, and Thessa felt the attention of 100 people focus on her answer. "Love comes in many forms," she said. "Respect is a kind of love. Trust is a kind of love. Captain Webb has both from me." It was a diplomatic answer, but as she said it, she realized it was also true. Later in their quarters, Marcus brought her tea prepared the way she liked it. "Thank you for what you said," he told her. "That question was unfair. It was calculated to create doubt about our marriage." "Yes." Marcus sat across from her. "Does it bother you that we are basically performing for the public?" "We are not performing." Thessa sipped her tea. "We are married. We live together. We work together. That is real. But we are not in love." "No." She met his eyes steadily. "Should we be?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I do not know. Sometimes I think it would be easier if we were. Other times I think it would make everything more complicated." "Zalari do not marry for love," Thessa said. "We marry for duty and alliance and the good of our houses. Love, if it comes, is a blessing, not a requirement." "That sounds lonely." "Perhaps, but it is honest. Human marriages claim to be about love, yet many of them fail. At least we know what we have. And what do we have? A partnership, built on mutual respect and shared purpose." She paused. "Is that so terrible?" "No," Marcus said after a moment. "No, it is not terrible at all." That evening, Marcus taught her a human game called chess, black and white pieces on a checkered board, each with different movements. The goal was to trap the opponent's king through strategy and patience. It is ancient, thousands of years old. Every culture that played it changed the rules slightly, but the core remained the same. Thessa was terrible at first, losing pieces to careless attacks. But Marcus was patient, showing her strategies and teaching her to think several moves ahead. "You are improving," he said as she captured his knight. "This game requires thinking like the enemy." Exactly. The best commanders always understood their opponents. They played late into the night, and somewhere between games, Tessa reached across the board and placed her hand over his. Marcus looked up, surprised by the contact. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For being patient with me, for respecting my culture, for trying to make this work." Marcus turned his hand over and gently squeezed her purple fingers. "We are in this together. That is what partners do." They stayed like that for a moment, with their hands joined over a chessboard. It was the first real gesture of affection between them, small and careful but genuine. And Tessa realized that somewhere in the past 6 months, she had stopped thinking of Marcus Webb as the human she had been forced to marry. She was starting to think of him as simply Marcus, her partner. Perhaps eventually something more.
The attack begins. Vanthos Prime was beautiful in a way that made Tessa's heart ache. The border colony sat between human and Zalari space and had been one of the most contested systems during the war. 4 major battles had been fought in orbit above this world, and thousands had died in the cold darkness between stars. Now, 9 months after the peace treaty, the colony was celebrating rebirth. Schools were being rebuilt with funding from both empires. Children of both species played together in parks that had once been battlefields. Markets sold goods from a dozen worlds, and the air smelled of cooking food and fresh flowers. It was supposed to be a symbol of hope, and watching it, Tessa felt genuine pride in what their marriage represented. She stood on a platform overlooking a crowd of mixed species, humans and Zalari together, waiting for her to speak. Beside her, Marcus stood in his dress uniform, looking handsome and calm. They had arrived that morning for the dedication ceremony of a new school, built jointly by both peoples. "They look happy," Marcus said quietly, as he surveyed the crowd. "They do." Tessa felt warmth spreading through her chest. This was what their marriage was supposed to achieve. This peace, these smiling faces, these children who would grow up without knowing war. The colony governor was a Zalari named Torveth, who stepped forward to introduce them. He was an older male with faded silver markings and kind eyes. But before he could speak, the sky changed. It started as a distant roar, like thunder from a clear sky. Then the air itself seemed to shake, and Tessa looked up to see ships dropping out of hyperspace. 20 vessels descended through the clouds in attack formation. Zalari design, but they were not displaying peace signals. They were displaying war colors. "Get down." Marcus grabbed her arm and pulled her behind the stone podium just as the first explosions erupted across the colony. Orbital bombardment tore through buildings that had just been rebuilt, and the crowd scattered in panic. Screaming filled the air, mixing with the roar of weapons fire and collapsing structures. Governor Torveth was shouting into his communicator, trying to reach the orbital defense platforms. His face went pale as purple drained from his skin. "They are gone. The defense grid is destroyed. All of it." "How many ships?" Marcus's voice had changed completely. The gentleness was gone, replaced by something sharp and focused and cold. 20 warships. Ground troops are already landing." Torveth looked at Marcus with desperate eyes. "We have no military here. Just colony security. Maybe 200 trained fighters. Then we use what we have." Marcus stood and looked across the panicking crowd. His eyes were different now, hard and calculating, like a predator assessing a battlefield. Every trace of the gentleman who played chess and cooked risotto had vanished. "Where is the main civilian shelter?" he demanded. "Central District, underground bunker system. It can hold 6,000 people. Get everyone there now." Marcus turned to Tessa, and his expression softened for just a moment. "I need you to help organize the evacuation. Can you do that?" Tessa nodded, though she was still processing the sudden shift in her husband. This was not the man she had come to know over 9 months. This was someone else entirely, someone she had never seen before. Marcus grabbed a security officer by the shoulder.
I need a weapons locker and a communication channel to every security team on this planet, right now. The officer stared at him. Who are you to give orders? Captain Marcus Webb, Terran Federation, Special Operations. Move. The authority in his voice was absolute and left no room for argument. The officer moved immediately. Within 10 minutes, Marcus had transformed from diplomat to combat commander. He stood in the colony emergency command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing enemy landing zones. Zalari dropships were deploying troops across the colony in coordinated waves, 3,000 soldiers at minimum, perhaps more arriving every hour. Governor Torveth looked at the numbers and seemed to age decades in moments. We cannot fight this. We should surrender and negotiate. They're targeting civilian shelters, Marcus said, pointing at the display. Look at their attack patterns. These are not regular Zalari military. Look at their ship markings. Tessa leaned closer and felt ice form in her stomach as she recognized the symbols. Purists, she whispered, the hardliners who rejected the peace treaty. Which means they are not here to occupy. Marcus's voice was flat and emotionless. They are here to kill. Especially the humans living here. They want to restart the war by committing an atrocity that cannot be forgiven. Then what do we do? Torveth asked. Marcus studied the tactical map for another moment. Then he started giving orders, fast and precise and tactical. He divided the security forces into small, mobile units designed for hit-and-run attacks. He identified choke points in the colony layout where defenders could slow enemy advances. He designated supply caches and fallback positions and communication protocols. Within minutes, he had created a complete defensive strategy from nothing. We cannot win, one of the security officers said. It is 20-1 at best. We do not need to win, Marcus replied calmly. We need to survive for 48 hours. That is how long until the nearest human fleet can reach us. I have already sent the distress signal on emergency channels. 48 hours against 3,000 soldiers. Yes, Marcus looked at the man without blinking. You have a problem with that? The officer swallowed hard and shook his head. Tessa watched all of this in something close to shock. Where was the man who taught her chess with infinite patience, the one who made her grandmother's risotto and talked about ancient history with boyish enthusiasm? This Marcus Webb was a stranger, cold and efficient, and utterly confident in his ability to wage war. Commander Driss appeared at her side, having fought through the chaos to reach her. He looked at Marcus with new eyes. Your husband reveals hidden depths, Princess. What do you know of this? Tessa asked quietly. I read his full service record before your wedding. Captain Webb was not merely a combat pilot. He was special operations, black operations, assassination and sabotage, and impossible missions behind enemy lines. Tessa felt cold despite the heat of nearby fires. What did they call him? Driss hesitated before answering. The Silent Storm. He was responsible for 17 confirmed high-value target eliminations during the war. His unit destroyed 6 Zalari supply depots and 3 command vessels. They said he could move through an enemy base like smoke and leave nothing but bodies behind. The name sent a chill through Tessa. She thought of Marcus smiling over chess games and looking sad when he spoke of his grandmother. How could that person be connected to a name like Silent Storm? Tessa, Marcus called her name, and she walked to his side at the tactical display. I need you to lead one of the evacuation teams. Get civilians from the outer districts to the central shelter. Can you do that? Yes, but what about you? I will coordinate the defense from here and lead strike teams where needed. He handed her a communication device. Stay in contact. Report enemy positions when you see them. And Tessa, he paused and something human flickered in his cold eyes. Be careful. You as well. Take Driss and 20 fighters. Move fast. The enemy will reach the outer districts in less than an hour. Marcus! Tessa grabbed his arm before he could turn away. Who are you? He looked at her, and for just a moment she saw something familiar. regret, perhaps, or apology for what she was about to witness. I am the person I didn't want you to see, but right now, I am the person these people need. We will talk later if there is a later. Then he was moving again, issuing orders and coordinating defenses. A weapon in human form pointed at the enemy. Tessa stood frozen for a heartbeat before Driss touched her shoulder. Princess, we must go. Your husband is right. The civilians need evacuation. She forced herself to move, gathering her team and heading into the chaos of the burning colony. Explosions still rocked the sky, and buildings collapsed around them, but wherever she went, she found that Marcus's orders had preceded her. Security teams were moving civilians in organized groups. Supply points had been established at strategic locations. What should have been pure panic was becoming controlled evacuation. Her team reached the outer residential district and found 300 people hiding in their homes, terrified families clutching children and precious belongings. Tessa spoke to them in Zalari, keeping her voice calm and authoritative despite the fear clawing at her own chest. Follow us. We will get you to safety. Stay together and move quickly. They traveled through the streets using covered routes that Marcus had identified on the tactical maps. Twice they heard enemy dropships overhead and pressed against walls until the sound faded. Once they saw Zalari purist soldiers in the distance executing someone on the street, and Tessa had to physically restrain a young Zalari male from charging to help. We cannot save the dead, she told him harshly. We can only save the living. Move! They reached the central shelter without direct contact, though the sounds of battle grew closer with every passing minute. As they entered the underground facility, an explosion rocked the entrance.
The divine rage unleashed. Reports flooded the command post from across the colony as night fell over Vanthos Prime. Marcus stood at the center of the tactical display, coordinating 12 different operations simultaneously. His voice never wavered, and his hands never shook. He was a machine of war wrapped in human flesh. Tessa watched him send teams into enemy positions with surgical precision. They collapsed tunnels, trapping purist units underground. They rigged fuel depots to explode, destroying equipment and supplies. They ambushed patrols and vanished before reinforcements could respond. The purists had 3,000 soldiers. Marcus had 200, and somehow he was winning. Strike Team 4, report, Marcus said into his communicator. Enemy armor approaching Sector 7, 3 heavy tanks. Fall back to position Delta. I will handle the tanks personally. Tessa grabbed his arm as he moved toward the exit. You cannot be serious. 3 tanks alone? I am not asking permission. Marcus checked his rifle and grabbed a pack of explosive charges from the supply rack. Keep coordinating the defense. I will be back. Then he was gone, disappearing into the smoke-filled streets like a ghost. Tessa watched through surveillance drones as her husband moved through terrain the tanks could not follow. He climbed through rubble and slipped between burning buildings. The tanks were massive war machines, capable of leveling entire blocks. Marcus was one man with explosives and determination. He destroyed the first tank by climbing onto its hull and placing charges on its weapon systems. The explosion threw him clear, but he rolled to his feet and kept moving. The second tank tried to target him, but he was already beneath it, attaching charges to its treads. When it exploded, he was 30 meters away, sprinting toward the third. The final tank crew saw him coming and opened fire with everything they had. Marcus dodged through a hail of weapons fire that should have killed him 10 times over. He reached the tank and climbed its side as the crew tried desperately to shake him loose. The explosion lit up the night sky. Marcus walked back into the command post 20 minutes later, covered in ash and blood. Tessa ran to him and grabbed his shoulders. You could have died, she said. I did not. He checked his rifle again. Those tanks cannot kill anyone else now. This is insane, Marcus. You cannot keep doing this alone. He looked at her then. Really looked at her. His brown eyes were exhausted, but clear and filled with something she had never seen before. Raw honesty, without any walls between them. Yes, I can. This is what I am, Thessa. This is what I have always been. I am sorry you have to see it. I do not understand. How can you be this person, and also the man who plays chess with me, the man who makes risotto and talks about history? They are the same person. Marcus's voice was quiet. War does not change who I am. It just shows what I am willing to do to protect people I care about. And I care about these people. I care about this peace we have built together. He paused, and his hand came up to touch her face. His fingers were warm despite everything. I care about you, Thessa. More than I expected to. More than I thought possible when this started. The confession hung in the air between them. Around them, the war continued with explosions in the distance and screaming and death. But in that moment, Thessa saw Marcus clearly for the first time. He was both the gentleman and the warrior, the diplomat and the killer, and he was using every part of himself to save lives. I care about you too, she said, which is why I need you to survive this. Then help me. He squeezed her hand briefly. We have 36 hours until the fleet arrives. We just have to hold on. They fought side by side through the night. Thessa led her own strike team, hitting enemy supply lines, while Marcus coordinated the broader defense. She saw him in combat again and again, and each time she barely recognized him. The gentle diplomat was completely gone. In his place was something primal and unstoppable. Marcus moved through enemy lines like a force of nature, precise and lethal, and utterly without mercy to those who threatened innocent lives. General Vorax, the purist commander, became obsessed with killing Marcus personally. He screamed challenges over every communication channel, demanding single combat with the human demon who was destroying his forces. Marcus ignored him completely. He cared nothing for glory or honor, only for protecting civilians and surviving until reinforcements arrived. The purists began to break psychologically. Their soldiers whispered fearfully about the silent storm who appeared from shadows and left only bodies behind. Units refused to advance into sectors where Marcus had been spotted. Their coordination collapsed as fear spread through their ranks. By dawn of the second day, enemy casualties numbered over 800, while Marcus had only lost 41 defenders. It was impossible. It was miraculous. It was the divine rage of a man protecting everything he loved. Love forged in fire. The sky exploded with light as human warships dropped out of hyperspace above Vanthos Prime. Thessa watched through the command post displays as 20 Federation vessels engaged the Purist fleet in orbit. Help had finally arrived. Marcus stood at the tactical display, tracking the battle above. Relief washed over his face, making him look young and vulnerable for the first time in 2 days. "It is over," he said quietly. "They made it." Then his eyes rolled back and he collapsed. Thessa caught him before he hit the ground, screaming for medics. When she pulled back his jacket, she found blood soaking through his uniform, 3 bullet wounds in his side and back that he had said nothing about, burns across his arms that he had ignored. He had been fighting for 2 days on willpower alone, slowly bleeding out while he saved thousands of lives. "You fool," she whispered as medical teams rushed over. "You absolute fool." "Had to keep everyone safe," Marcus mumbled as his eyes fluttered closed. "Had to keep you safe." They carried him to the medical bay, and Thessa followed, refusing to leave his side. She held his hand through surgery and sat beside his bed for 12 hours until he finally woke. The first thing Marcus saw when he opened his eyes was Thessa's face. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her golden eyes and her purple skin pale with worry. "Hey," he said weakly. "Hey," Thessa squeezed his hand. "You almost died." "But I did not." "Because you are too stubborn to die, apparently." Marcus tried to smile, but it turned into a wince of pain. "How bad?" 3 bullet wounds, 2nd-degree burns, severe blood loss. The doctors say you should have collapsed after the first 12 hours. They can't explain how you kept fighting. I had something worth fighting for." Thessa felt tears prick her eyes. She had not cried since childhood,
but now she could not stop them from falling. "I was so afraid," she admitted, "when you went after those tanks alone, when you kept throwing yourself into danger. I thought I was going to watch you die." Marcus reached up and touched her face gently, wiping away a tear with his thumb. "I am sorry. I did not want you to see that side of me. The killer, the monster they created during the war. You are not a monster. I have done monstrous things, Thessa, things that haunt me, things I can never take back." She took his hand and pressed it against her cheek. "You saved 3,000 civilians. You held an impossible line for 2 days against overwhelming odds. You used every skill you have to protect innocent lives. That is not monstrous, Marcus. That is heroic." He was quiet for a long moment. "Do you mean that?" "Yes." Thessa leaned closer until her forehead touched his. "I have seen both sides of you now. The gentleman who teaches me chess and the warrior who destroys armies. And I love both of them." The word hung between them. Love. Neither of them had said it before. Their marriage was supposed to be political, a symbol, a partnership at most. But somewhere in 9 months of small gestures and shared meals and late-night conversations, it had become something real. "You love me," Marcus said quietly. "Yes." Thessa pulled back to look into his eyes. "I did not expect to. I did not plan to, but I do." Marcus was silent, and for a terrible moment, Thessa feared she had made a mistake, that he did not feel the same, that the connection she felt was one-sided. Then he pulled her down and kissed her. It was gentle despite his injuries, soft and warm and full of emotion he had kept hidden behind walls of duty and guilt. Thessa melted into him, feeling his arms wrap around her, despite the pain it must have caused. "I love you too," he said when they finally parted. "I think I have loved you for months. I was just afraid to admit it." "Why?" "Because loving someone means having something to lose, and I have already lost so much." Thessa understood. She had felt the same fear, the same reluctance to open her heart to someone who might be taken from her. "We have both lost," she said, "but we have also found each other. Is that not the risk?" "Yes." Marcus smiled, and it was the genuine smile she had fallen in love with. The smile of the man who played chess and cooked risotto and talked about ancient history with boyish enthusiasm. "Yes," he said, "it is worth everything." They stayed together in the medical bay as Marcus recovered.